Hello, and welcome to my video.
Welcome to the
where I
final
will be
tier
taking you
of
through the urban legend Iceberg. If you want to see the original image of the iceberg, you can look in the description below and find the original Reddit post where the user DarkMoon230 originally posted this image on Reddit. They are a close friend to me, and I would appreciate it if you gave them some kind of shout out or commented on their Reddit post. Thank you. Let's explore the iceberg. The grey alien is the most commonly seen type of alien, and they are often called grey aliens because of the colour of their skin. They are often cited as being seen as short, bald, and are seen often with black eyes. They are known to have visited many countries from around the world and have been reported as early as the late 19th century. What happens when you come in contact with a grey alien differs from person to person. It is seen that grey aliens are often mischievous or intimidated by a human presence. However, if a human is unwary enough of the grey alien's presence, they may be taken aboard their spacecraft and may be experimented on at the grey alien's will. These experiments may leave marks on the human subject as some kind of cruel reminder for the encounter they have just been through. Area 51 is an area located in the state of Nevada in the USA where strange activity has been reported, from alien activity to future technology being seen. No one from the general public has been granted permission to enter into Area 51, making its ominous allure all the more tempting for adventurers and daredevils to explore. But beware, there are snipers watching your every move towards its gates, and who knows what lies beyond in terms of security. Bigfoot is a creature which is often referred to as the Sasquatch. It is most commonly seen across the Pacific Northwest of North America. Bigfoot is often cited as a bipedal creature which almost resembles an ape or a human, with its blackish-brownish fur which coats its entire body. Apparently Bigfoot is said to smell similar to rotten eggs or the scent of a skunk. People who have apparently witnessed Bigfoot report hearing strange wood knockings in the forest, almost to alert them to its presence. They also report hearing horrific screaming, similar to that of an owl or a coyote. Several reports indicate that Bigfoot is an incredibly dangerous creature who will tear apart anything in its path in the woods, whether that be tents, cabins, or even sadly pets, as reported by a witness who said that Bigfoot tore up his dog in his backyard before he scared off the creature into the woods of the night. The Loch Ness Monster is a creature which has apparently been sighted in the Loch Ness in Scotland, who also has the nickname of Nessie. Rumours of the Loch Ness Monster have been reported as far back as the 6th century by Saint Columba, who reported a man being dragged underwater by a strange water beast, and it said they were too late to save the man's boat. However, when they approached the creature, it backed away when Saint Columba made the sign of a cross with his fingers and said, "Do not touch the man, go no further." Then they miraculously saved the man's life. Since then, it's been reported throughout time in the Loch Ness, but the most famous case of the Loch Ness Monster would be that of the surgeon's photograph, which was a photograph apparently taken by Robert Kenneth Wilson, which featured what looked like definitive proof of the Loch Ness Monster. However, in 1994, it was determined that this picture was in fact a hoax, through documents showing how the creature was created, and it was later revealed that Robert Kenneth Wilson didn't even take the photo and was just playing a part in the hoax, so it looked more believable the general scientific public because he was a physician who was highly respected at the time. However, there are still cases that there is something in Loch Ness. The bogeyman is a mythical creature which has a different appearance and different folklore surrounding it for what seems like every country in the world, but every country seems to agree that this creature is somewhat demonic, with sharp claws, long horns, and hooves. And it seems that there are 3 types of bogeymen in the world. The first kind is the most common kind, who goes after misbehaving children and punishes them in a more fair manner by telling them off, or just generally teaching them to be nicer by scaring them into being nice. The second kind is said to protect those who are innocent in the world, and to protect those who deserve protection. The third kind is a much more harsh type of bogeyman, prefers to kidnap or even eat those who torment its path, and it's said to go after the evil people in the world, and it does not care for how old or how young you are. It will find you, and it will get you in the depths of the night. The Men in Black are strange authority figures who are believed to have covered up several world events which have been impacted by extraterrestrial activity, and it's reported that these Men in Black creatures wear all black suits, black fedoras, and black sunglasses. They are said to have extremely strange facial features, or no faces at all. But since very little information is known about these Men in Black creatures, it's extremely hard to find any suitable information regarding them, because they are notorious for suppressing any information about their existence and what their true cause to the world is. The legend of Bloody Mary has had many changes over the years from what the original legend was. The legend originally started as a story of a young woman who wanted to see what their future partner would look like. So, this young lady would light a candle and go up a flight of stairs backwards, and they would allegedly see their future husband's face in the mirror. However, if this young woman was to die before they could marry, they would see the skull of themselves looking back at them, or they would see the face of the Grim Reaper. However, this urban legend quickly grew into something much, much darker, and somehow the conclusion led to us seeing what we have today. If you don't know the legend of Bloody Mary goes something a bit like this. Allegedly, if you stare into a mirror with the lights off, and you say Bloody Mary 3 times over, then the spirit of Bloody Mary will come out of the mirror and either claw your eyes out, take you to the underworld, drink your own blood, or, less threateningly, they will just curse at you or scream at you in a horrific manner. However, no one knows the actual way to summon Bloody Mary, as there are many different ways to summon her. The story of Candyman is similar to that of Bloody Mary in the aspects of the ritual part of the urban legend, which requires the participant to say Candyman 5 times in the mirror, then Candyman will come out and kill the participant with his hook hand. However, there is a lot more information about Candyman compared to that of Bloody Mary, and it's said that Candyman was once a slave in the south of the United States of America, and he worked on a plantation. But one day his boss told him to create portraits of everyone in the family. But when it came to creating a portrait of the plantation owner's daughter, he ended up falling in love with her, and was eventually caught by the plantation owner, and the plantation owner started a lynch mob against this slave, and searched for him all over the farm, until he was eventually caught in a barn house, and his arm was cut off by a rusty saw, whilst beehives were put over the rest of his body. He died from his severe injuries. He now walks in the world, looking for anyone who dares to taunt him by chanting his name 5 times in the mirror. vanishing hitchhiker is an apparition which appears often on the side of the road, where it's often seen as a young woman or a young man looking for a ride to their next destination. They'll usually talk to the driver for a bit before asking to go to a certain address, which the driver will usually go to. Then suddenly, as the driver looks around for a moment whilst concentrating on the road, the hitchhiker will have soon disappeared into nothingness, and they might only leave behind a jumper or an item in their pocket. In some stories, the driver arrives at the destination only to find a graveyard where the driver finds the name of the hitchhiker in one of the tombstones. In some variations of the story, they also go to previous areas where the person might have lived before, where there is now a family member who tells the driver that this person died in a horrible accident by the side of the road, and that now they forever haunt the roads. For all drivers to beware. The babysitter is a popular college urban legend, where a babysitter has been chosen to take care of some children for the night. But, as the night continues, the babysitter continues to receive terrifying phone calls, where a man is saying on the opposite end of the phone, "Have you checked the children?" Yes, the babysitter would always tell the person to go away, and they would start to question who it is on the opposite end of the phone. Eventually, these calls get so extreme, the babysitter calls the police. However, the police can't do anything, because the caller hasn't done anything technically illegal yet. So the police say to hang on the phone until the caller calls again, then to call back the police so they can track down the caller's location. But when they eventually call back to the babysitter, they tell them that the calls are coming from upstairs and that the babysitter needs to leave the house immediately. There are several versions of the story's ending. In one ending, the babysitter escapes with the children, and with the police arresting the culprit. But sadly, in most of these endings, the children do not tend to survive. However, the least hopeful version of the story is the one where the intruder ends up killing not only the children, but the babysitter as well, and they escape before the police arrive. The spider bite is an urban legend about a young woman who is from a western part of the world and decides to go on holiday to a more exotic location so she can sunbathe in the hot rays of this foreign country. However, when she is sunbathing, a spider bites her cheek, but she doesn't feel it until the bite mark later turns into a boil upon her skin, which keeps getting larger by the day. Until one day she can't stand the boil anymore and seeks medical attention. However, when the doctors eventually get her ready for her operation, the boil bursts and unleashes hundreds of baby spiders upon her face. After this, the woman finally loses her mind and has to be sent to the mental hospital for the rest of her days. The Hook is an urban legend created in the late 1950s and was likely heavily influenced by the recent chain of murders which happened in Texarkana in 1946, which are more commonly known as the Texarkana Moonlight Murders. But the story itself starts off with two teenagers making out in Lover's Lane, listening to music blaring from their radio, when suddenly an announcement comes on the radio and says that an inmate from a local mental asylum has escaped, and he is reported to be extremely dangerous, and one of his most distinguishing features is his hook for a hand, and everyone should stay inside until police can get him into safe hands again. The couple hears this, but continues to make out, despite the obvious danger looming over them. Then, this is where this part of the story usually changes to depending on who you're hearing it from. Usually, the couple hears noise of something scraping against their car, and then tries to leave because they're freaked out by the noise. They then pull up to a safe location where they talk for a bit and investigate the car. They look at all the damages surrounding the car, with different scrapes and different bits of paint coming off. Then look to one of the doors and see a hook hand grasping with a prosthetic arm trailing behind in the road. They realize they were seconds away from being the next victim of this hook man. Other versions of this story have a more gloomy ending, including the boyfriend going to investigate a shadowy figure watching over them and comes back to find nothing, only to see that his girlfriend has been decapitated in the car. Another version includes the girlfriend waiting for her boyfriend to come back after he went to investigate a shadowy figure, but she ends up just hearing an irritating bumping noise on top of the car's roof, until she decides to drive away and finds out that the entire time it was her boyfriend's hung corpse hitting the car over and over again. The Kidney Thieves, or the Kidney Heist, is an urban legend about a young man who goes out to a bar wanting to have a nice night out after a particularly tough day. After ordering a drink, he then sees a particularly beautiful woman opposite him who comes over and talks to him and offers him several drinks. He accepts and talks with her for the rest of the night. They both go home together, but then he passes out and doesn't remember anything else. He then wakes up in a bath full of bloody ice, with a note in front of him saying, "Call an ambulance or you will die in 5 minutes." He's later told in hospital both of his kidneys have been removed, and they have been sold on the black market for over £5,000. Aren't You Glad You Didn't Turn On the Lights is an urban legend about two female roommates who are both interested in going to a party, but one realizes they have a test the very next day, so they decide to not go, and they decide to go to the library instead and study. But by the time this roommate returns, it's extremely late at night, and when they enter into their room, they can hear very heavy breathing coming from their other roommate in their bed, and they think that their other roommate has brought back someone else to spend the night with, so they decide to not turn on a light, in terms of politeness, but they decide to go to sleep. And then, when they wake up eventually in the morning, they look over at their roommate, only to see they've been brutally murdered in the night, and they turn around to see a message in lipstick or blood saying, "Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the lights?" The killer in the backseat is an urban legend that has been noted back as early as 1968 in textbooks. There are two versions that have been noted, but both versions include a woman that is driving the main vehicle of the story. In the first version, the woman has a car that is following her and is blinking its headlights a repeated amount of times, and eventually ends up following her home. She is absolutely terrified when the driver is coming up to her car, but he ends up going into the back of her car and pulls out a man with an axe in his hand who is about to attack the woman. In the second version of the story, a woman pulls up to a gas station and is filling up her car and goes back into her car looking for her credit card. But the gas attendant comes out and tells her that her credit card wasn't working the first time. So she has to go back into the gas station, only for the tenant to tell her that there was a man in the back of her car with an axe, and they end up calling the police and getting this man arrested. However, in some versions, the woman ignores all the warnings and ends up driving off and meeting a truly brutal end. Shumen's-Kanlek-2 is an urban legend where a girl is left home alone for the night with only her dog to keep her company. When she starts feeling tired, she goes to bed and has the dog under her bed to lick her fingers as some kind of reassurance that she has someone to keep her safe. Later on in the night, she wakes up to a dripping noise echoing throughout the house, so she goes to the bathroom and turns off the tap to make sure that there is no more dripping. Then she goes back to bed, putting her hand underneath the bed for it to be licked, and so it was. Then the girl wakes up again, only to hear the sound of the dripping again, so she searches all over the house, goes to the bathroom again, but the tap wasn't dripping. Instead, the noise sounds like it was coming from a cabinet. So she opened up the cabinet, and inside hung her dog, with its throat slit and its blood dripping down the cabinet into a pool on the ground, with a message next to it written in blood saying, "Humans can lick too." The Body in the Bed is a story popularized in the early 90s where a couple book into a hotel in Las Vegas, which is said to either be the Excalibur or the Mirage Hotel. Apparently, the couple enter into their room and immediately smell a foul odor and report it to the hotel. But the hotel look around their room and look for the cause of the smell, but find nothing. However, the couple still feel unsatisfied with the smell lingering in their room, and they tell the hotel that they would like a new room. However, the hotel has been fully booked that night, and they have to sleep in that room for the whole night, since they have no other option. In the morning they wake up to find the smell even more hideous than it was the night before. They tell the hotel about this again, and they send up a maid to look inside their room after the couple leaves for the day. When the couple returns, the room is completely blocked off by the police, and they find a police officer who tells them that their possessions have been moved to a new room. Later the couple find out that the maid who went to look in their room discovered a decomposing corpse underneath their bed. After the couple hears about this, the hotel offers a lifetime free room for their silence. The Man Under the Car is an urban legend which became popularized in 1984 in America. However, there were no actual reported cases of this event happening prior to the urban legend being spread around. But the story goes that a woman is coming back from shopping at her local mall when all of a sudden an attacker hits her in the back of her Achilles tendon with a knife or a tire iron, because they knew the woman would have their hands full of groceries and shopping, so they wouldn't be able to defend their legs. And this attacker goes to rob this woman's possessions or steal their car, or much worse. In some versions of this urban legend, there are reports that this urban legend needs to be carried out like some kind of ritual for an individual to join a gang. And apparently this initiate will cut off a part of the body from the person they are attacking to prove their worth to the gang, and the bigger the body part, the bigger the reward this initiate will get. The body in the water tank is an urban legend about a hotel receiving complaints from customers about their water tasting funny and looking slightly off colour. So the hotel staff investigate the water tank and find out that a body has been found inside of it. Older versions of this story replace the hotel with a village and the water tank with a well, and the results always find a body decaying in the water that the villagers were drinking every day. Sadly, this urban legend turned out to be completely true for one case at the Cecil Hotel in 2013, which is a hotel I could probably do an entire video on with its already mysterious and eerie past. But in 2013, residents started complaining to the employees of the Cecil Hotel about low water pressure, and some residents recall their water being black and even tasting particularly unusual. This all came to a stop on February the 9th, when a hotel maintenance worker investigated the water tank, only to find the body of Elisa Lam floating in the water. The case was later issued as an accidental drowning, and all reports lead to Elisa Lam being off her medication that she was taking at the time. However, how she got into the water tank is open to interpretation by a lot of different sources, but the official report states that Elisa Lam walked into the water tank after suffering from withdrawal from her medication, and she allegedly threw herself into the water tank on purpose. However, other reports state that this was impossible due to the upstairs doors being locked off and with alarms being set off if someone tried to enter through this door. However, there are also several videos showing that you can get to the top of the Cecil Hotel without going through these doors, and Elisa Lam could have easily used these to get to the rooftop to meet her untimely demise. There are also signs that Elisa Lam may have been assaulted and murdered, and she could have been put in the water tank as a way for the killer to hide her body and try to dismiss it as an accident, so no false claims could be identified against the perpetrator, along with no evidence being shown on the body after it was submerged in water after several hours. But sadly, all these theories and speculations must all end in the tragic end of an innocent's life that was lost. The Killer Cop is an urban legend where a cop knocks on a woman's door and asks her if he can investigate her home because there has been a serial killer roaming around the local area, and she accepts, letting the officer inside. The cop then looks around her house and starts to manically laugh when he reaches the kitchen. The woman asks him what's so funny, and he tells her that you shouldn't let a serial killer into your house. From this, she quickly realizes that the serial killer is in fact the cop she has been talking to this whole time. However, this realization is too little, too late, and she runs to the front door, only to have her throat slit by the assailant. Luckily, this is merely an urban legend, and nothing more. However, there have been past cases of serial killers dressed up as police officers, such as Ted Bundy, who was dressed as a cop when he approached a woman by the name of Carol Durant. She said that he apparently called himself Officer Roseland, who apparently worked for the Murray Police Department. He said that she should come to the police station because someone tried to break into her car. So she went inside his car. However, on the journey, she discovered that he was, in fact, not going to the police station, but in the complete opposite direction. When she confronted Ted about this, he tried to handcuff her and tried to restrain her. However, she was able to fight him off and escape the car successfully, and live to tell the tale of a close encounter with one of the most infamous serial killers of all time. Halloween hanging is an urban legend about a realistic-looking Halloween decoration of a hanging corpse in the front yard of a homeowner. People are delighted with how realistic this corpse looks and go to the house to congratulate the owner. However, the homeowner never responds to their knocks, and days after Halloween has passed, the hanged corpse still stays up until people start to notice that the corpse is moulding and is in fact a real body. Sadly, there are several real-life versions of this story, from murders being framed as Halloween decorations, suicides being shown on open display to the public, and even some cases of accidental hangings where the homeowner is setting up their Halloween decorations, only to end up hanging themselves. Cropsy is the name of a dangerous mental patient who allegedly escaped the Willowbrook Mental Hospital, which is located in Staten Island, which is south of New York City. And this patient would allegedly grab children in the dead of the night if they were in the streets alone. He would often be depicted as having a hook for a hand or wielding an axe as his weapon of choice. Sadly, this urban legend was based around a real event where 5 children were kidnapped between the years of 1972 and 1987 in the Staten Island area until their kidnapper was eventually caught in 1988. The name of this kidnapper was Andre Rand, and it was later revealed that he may have kidnapped and killed these 5 children to sacrifice them to Satan, and people still think that there was a larger network of people who were involved with Andre, who were also hiding out at the Willowbrook Mental Hospital. Andre Rand is still in prison and is eligible for parole in 2037. Welcome to the Wonderful World of AIDS is a story which begins with a man who meets a particularly beautiful young woman, and the man proceeds to be completely seduced by this young lady and ends up spending the night with her. In the morning, there is no sign of the young lady. Then he enters into his bathroom to see the message, "Welcome to the wonderful world of AIDS," written in lipstick on the bathroom mirror. He then proceeds to tell the police about this encounter, and apparently this woman has had multiple victims in the past with similar accounts. This story has an incredibly similar feel to the kidney heist and the lick hand, with the climax of the story being the message in the mirror. Also, the perpetrator is sometimes referred to as AIDS Mary or AIDS Harry by the police. Though there have been cases of people giving other people AIDS on purpose, there have been no reported cases of this regard reported. The corpse in the chimney is an urban legend about a father dressing up as Santa for his family on Christmas Day. After finding out that his business trip has been cancelled, he decides to go down the chimney for a surprise. However, the man ends up getting stuck down the chimney, and he ends up meeting his final demise, suffocating to death there. Later, the family lights a fire, only to start smelling a foul stench coming from the chimney. Later, they look inside the chimney to see the father of the family stuck inside the chimney. There have been several cases of people being stuck inside chimneys, but there are only a couple of people dying from suffocation. Sadly, these stories include family members wanting to surprise their family, burglars trying to break into a house, and even in 2010, a Californian woman who had previously broken up with her partner tried to break back into his house, only to get stuck in his chimney and sadly suffocate to death before rescuers could break down the chimney and rescue her. The story of the toxic woman goes that a woman was admitted to hospital after her skin started to turn yellow. After the doctors began CPR on this woman, she began to emit a foul smell, incapacitating all the hospital workers in the room. Eventually, this woman died from being left on the operating table with no one to work on her, and her death was ruled a mystery as it was investigated by the CDC, who were able to find out what was causing all these toxins. Sadly, the story is partially true and was based upon a real event that happened in 1994. The patient's name was Gloria Ramirez, and she was admitted to hospital on the 19th of February 1994. She had previously received chemotherapy for her cervical cancer, and she had been just brought back into hospital after suffering heart palpitations and severe breathing problems. The medical team available injected her with several medications, which caused her body to react strangely and started to emit a foul odour that was thought to be emitting from her mouth, along with an oily-like substance which was covering her entire body. It was also reported that crystals appeared on Gloria's body. A nurse by the name of Susan Kane took some of the blood from Gloria's body and smelt the syringe, and commented that it smelt like an ammonia-like smell. After this, she soon passed the syringe to another nurse. Susan Kane then fainted and had to be taken out of the room. Soon 3 nurses had fainted, and most of the staff inside the room had to be evacuated out of the room, apart from a select few who were left to operate on Gloria. At the end of it all, 23 people had become incredibly ill. 5 had been hospitalized. Sadly, after 45 minutes of surgery, Gloria Ramirez passed away from kidney failure due to her cancer. It's theorized that she had been using dimethyl sulfoxide, which may have made the electric shock from the defibrillations cause her blood to become fused with several other chemicals to create a toxic agent of some kind. However, this has never been fully confirmed, as her body could never be properly examined. The Goatman is a creature often seen in the state of Maryland in the USA. It's reported that this creature was first seen on Fletchertown Road, Bowie, and he apparently would stalk anyone around the area of the road and eventually would track them down and slaughter them. It was reported that a family even lost their dog, and days later, their dog was found near a road, dead and decapitated. Many people say that this creature used to exist between the 1970s and the 1980s, with many people reporting that it let off horrific yells in the woods, and people report that they used to find dead animals in the wake of where this creature used to roam. People say that this Goatman was once a human who worked in the Bettsfield Agricultural Research Center. Apparently this scientist was experimenting with goats and humans, when suddenly the experiment went horrifically wrong, and the scientist was suddenly a half-man, half-goat creature. He soon broke out of the research facility, and then began the legend of the Goatman. However, there is also another legend in Texas, which is also called the Goatman. This Goatman haunts the old Orton Bridge. Allegedly, this Goatman was once a black farmer who was known to be a highly respected member of the community north of the Orton Bridge, and the locals even made a sign for him saying, "This way to the Goatman." However, once the Ku Klux Klan heard of this man, he was brutally lynched by the Klan. They hung his body on Alton Bridge. They remembered, however, that his family had also seen the whole event take place, so when the Klan went back to lynch the rest of his family as well, they were each brutally murdered. Apparently, when you cross the bridge with no headlights, you will see the Goatman itself, but not all the interactions have been pleasant, because some unfortunate people have reported being threateningly grabbed by the creature, and even having rocks thrown at them by the creature itself. The Dog Boy is an urban legend surrounding a house in Little Rock, which is in the state of Arkansas, where people have allegedly seen the spirit of a man who has the face of a dog. People claim to see this figure when they walk up to the house and look through its upstairs window. People have even reported walking through the house and they'll see someone walking directly towards them whilst wearing clothes, which would look much more old-fashioned. Then this figure will look suspiciously at them, glaring at them like they aren't supposed to be there. Ghost hunters have also reported feeling threatened to leave the property, as apparently this spirit has cursed at them several times. The spirit most people believe resides in this house is called Dogboy, who used to be known as Gerard Floyd Betts, who was called Dogboy because he would capture and torture any stray animals that he could get his hands on. Neighbours report hearing howls in the night coming from his house, and as Gerard grew older, he also grew more violent, often fighting with his father. This escalated one night, where he threw his father out the upstairs window, where the father grabbed onto the ledge until the police arrived. As this man was in his 70s, a fall of this magnitude will have surely done him major harm, or even caused death. However, Floyd Betts later died in 1981 after he succumbed to an illness that he had for a while. But many people believe that he was thrown down the stairs of his house by Gerard. Gerard continued to patrol the house for a couple more years, abusing his mum, before he was caught selling illegal substances out of his sunroom in his house, which caused him to be arrested in the late 1980s. But he still remained in jail until he died of an overdose in 1988. But people still report Gerald's hostile spirit living in the form of a half-dog, half-man ghost in his childhood home, forever roaming the grounds and eerily disturbing anyone who enters. Mothman is a creature that has been reported numerous times in the state of West Virginia. It's reported to have black furry skin with 2 giant wings which cover its whole body, along with 2 red eyes which ominously stand out in the dark. It was reported in 1956 when 2 young couples described seeing a creature with eyes that glowed red when their headlights flashed alongside the creature's face. These reportings went around this area for days, with different people reporting sightings of this mysterious creature, until December 13th, 1967, where it was reported moments after this creature had been sighted, the bridge collapsed, causing the death of 46 people. After this, the Mothman has been seen in many places around the world, right before a large loss of human life is set to occur. The black-eyed children are apparitions which have appeared all over the world, but no one really knows what these creatures want. But they are most commonly seen as children between the ages of 6 and 16. They are reported to be seen on the sides of roads or knocking on people's doors asking to come inside. According to one story, a woman let these mysterious children into her house only for them to ask where her restroom is. When her husband directed these children to the restroom, the woman saw these children had black, abyss-like eyes. When she reported this information to her husband, his nose started to bleed as he too had seen this horrific sight. Then, the power went out suddenly, and one of the children said, "Our parents are here now." The husband and wife immediately ran from the property, only to see 2 men who were very slender-like creatures taking away these black-eyed children, and they never saw them again. Days after this event, strange occurrences began around the house, including 3 of their 4 cats going missing, and the 4th one dying in a pool of his own blood mysteriously. Even as the days went on, nosebleeds that the husband had from that event didn't stop, so they decided to visit the hospital and ask for local doctors' help. They told the husband that he had a highly unusual form of cancer, which caused him to have these nosebleeds. There have been several theories about what these black-eyed children are, including that they are aliens from outer space trying to obtain some kind of human form, and are occasionally let out by the men in black to see how the general public will react. Another theory is that these children are meant to be the devil's children, and if you let them into your house, then you are inviting the devil into your house. Some people also say that they are vampiric creatures who wait at your bedside, waiting for you to fall asleep, so they can claim their reward. The Chupacabra is a creature that is reported to be seen in the deep south of America and all over Mexico and Puerto Rico. This creature's first reported victims were several pieces of livestock in the year 1975. When authorities first saw the aftermath of this event, they thought that it was some kind of satanic cult who drank the blood of their livestock because of how brutal these attacks were. However, there continued to be more and more reports happening around Puerto Rico. However, authorities realized that it couldn't have been a humanoid committing these horrific attacks, because when they looked into the livestock's corpses, they noticed that the livestock had very small bites and incisions all over their body. These incisions were too small to be made by a human, so they thought that it must have been made by some sort of creature. It's reported that this creature looks similar to a dog or a coyote. In other descriptions, this creature is reported to have the appearance of a more reptile-like creature though, with greyish-greenish skin, with a similar body to a kangaroo, where it can stand up on its hind legs and go face to face with its victim. However, there have been more sightings of this blood-sucking creature, even up to the modern day, and many people still believe it is the reason that their livestock died horrifically. Teke Teke is a Japanese story about a woman called Kahima Raiko, who was an office worker in Moran, Hokkaido. After finishing her day at work, she was walking to the train station, where she was then assaulted by several military officials, who then pushed her onto the train tracks. After they were done with her assault, she was left on the tracks, severely injured and unable to move. She decided to just wait for the train to come so she could die a more peaceful death. Eventually, the train came and it cut her in two. However, she was still alive because the weather was so cold that her blood froze after she had been cut in two. She tried to call for help, squirming around the train station, but only one employee saw her struggle, and instead of helping her, she put a plastic sheet over her body, leaving her to die a horrific and painful, slow death. But this woman didn't die as any other person would. Her body turned into the vengeful spirit of Teke Teke, who appears as the upper half of the woman's torso, whilst also holding a scythe for anyone unlucky enough to hear of her backstory. You cannot escape Teke Teke, as this spirit can travel at speeds faster than any car, and no one is known to have escaped her wrath. The Slit-mouthed woman is an urban legend about a beautiful woman who's wearing a surgical mask, who walks around in Japan looking for a victim to ask the question, "Am I pretty?" If the victim replies back with no, she will kill them immediately with the scissors she is holding in her hand. If you reply that she in fact looks nice, she will take off her mask to reveal her slit mouth, then ask, "Am I pretty?" again. If the victim replies with either no or any sign of negativity, she will split the person in two with her scissors. If they reply with yes, she will carve the same smile onto your face that is similar to her own. However, you can only escape an encounter with the slit-mouthed woman by either saying that she looks average, or by confusing her in some way where they will be long enough for her to not realize that you are trying to escape. This urban legend was such a massive fear in Japan that in 1979, children had to be escorted home by members of the Japanese PTA because they were afraid of possible attacks by the slit-mouthed woman. Charlie No-Face, also known as the Green Man, is an urban legend about a man who walked around the state of New Jersey who people claimed had glowing green skin after a nuclear accident at the Donetsk power plant, and now he's a spectre who wanders around the local area looking for victims. However, this urban legend was sadly true, and was used to humiliate an innocent man known as Ray Robinson. When he was 8 years old, he accidentally touched a wire on a telephone line, which led to his face becoming heavily burnt and his body becoming heavily injured. After this event, Ray chose to live a quiet life because everyone else in his life wanted to humiliate him because of his appearance, and because of this constant mockery, Ray chose to go out for walks late at night for comfort, so he wouldn't be seen by the general public and could embrace the night he loved so much on his own. People would sometimes like to talk with Ray and even drink beers with him. However, teens would sometimes bully Ray and make fun of his appearance, fight with him, make him drink bottles of urine, and even drive him down roads which he didn't know the way back from. After a while, it was reported that Ray started to carry around a pistol so he could stop this barrage of harassment. Sadly, Ray Robinson died in 1985 at the Beaver County Geriatric Counter. The story of La Llorona is that of a Latina woman who had 2 children and was married with a beautiful man, who she discovered one day was having an affair with another woman. Blinded by a rage of this affair, she drowned her 2 children in a pool of water, which she immediately regretted doing as she looked down at their bodies, trying to helplessly revive them. Unable to reconcile her feelings with herself over the loss of her children, she decided to also drown herself, thinking that she would see them in the afterlife. However, the greater deities wouldn't accept her into the afterlife until she found her children, so she spends her life endlessly going around the earth looking for her children, crying and moaning everywhere she searches. The Jersey Devil is a creature that was born in the area of New Jersey around 1735, where a mother had just given birth to her 12th child. When suddenly she found out that she was pregnant again, she claimed that her 13th child was going to be the devil itself. So when it came to this child actually being born, the birth seemed to be going fine, until suddenly the child, after being born, grew wings, hooves, a forked tail, and even a goat's head. Immediately after this happened, this creature then started to attack any passers-by, and immediately went up the chimney to escape, never to be seen by the family again. But in the local area, there began stories of strange livestock killings, and people saw a strange creature floating around the local sky, looking down on them. People have even claimed to have fired cannons at it, doing no damage at all. People have tried to find this creature and capture it, with its maximum bounty even going up to $100,000 at one point. However, no one has been able to successfully imprison this beast from committing any more heinous actions. The Bunny Man was once a resident in an insane asylum called Douglas Griffin. However, he was being transferred to another asylum due to his old asylum being nearly abandoned because of its inefficiency of handling the inmates. However, this bus curved off the road that was taking him to his new asylum, so all the patients escaped, and all of them were eventually caught, except from Douglas. When the police were searching for Douglas, they found multiple dead bunnies that were half-eaten on the Halifax Station Bridge, and that was all that was seen of this mysterious fig's actions for a while, until Halloween night sometime in the 1970s, where several teenagers were found hanging from the same bridge who were given the same treatment as the bunnies. However, this story seems to be based on an even stranger story, as allegedly a couple was sitting in their car on Halifax Road near midnight when suddenly a man dressed in a white suit with bunny ears came out and told the couple that they were on his property, and then he threw an axe at their car, smashing their windscreen. However, no one inside this car was hurt. Around 2 weeks later, another event was sighted and reported around a block away from the first incident. A security guard saw what he reported to be some kind of man-beast creature holding an axe, and this thing was seen inside an abandoned property on the opposite side of the road to him. So this security guard started to speak with this strange creature. However, this creature began to get more and more irritated with this man's questions, and it began to swipe at a nearby pole with its axe, saying, "All you people trespass here. If you don't get out of here, then I'll bust you on the head." Then the security guard walked away, only returning the next day with no sight of the Bunny Man. However, it's said that if you go on this bridge, or near this bridge, on Halloween night, then the Bunny Man will render your fate the same as the bunnies and the teenagers who laid before you. Krampus is a demonic version of Saint Nicholas in Northern European culture. It's said that Krampus and Saint Nicholas arrive on the night of December 5th, which is also known as Krampus Night. Krampus leaves any badly behaving children with branches and sticks in their stockings, while Saint Nicholas gives out presents and gifts. However, it is also said that if a child has been especially naughty and misbehaving, then they will be eaten by Krampus, or even dragged to hell itself with him. Then, on December 6th, children will awake to see what is left behind after their visit. Spring Hill Jack was an urban legend about a creature that was allegedly seen several times in the 1800s. This creature resembled that of a man with the face of a devil. This creature had eyes of fire and would often be seen with a mouth of blue and white fire as well. He would often be seen playing tricks on the citizens of London and would leap incredibly high to get away from anyone catching him. However, this creature's tricks ended up becoming more harmful as he started to assault people who were just going about their daily lives. This was first reported by Mary Stevens, who reported that this creature allegedly attacked her while she was returning from visiting her parents. This creature was said to have smelt like rotting flesh and was said to have felt like a corpse. Whilst this creature ripped into her clothing, Mary luckily managed to escape with her life. A search was conducted to look for this creature, however, nothing was ever found. On January the 9th, the Lord Mayor of London decided to take this situation seriously by setting up a reward system after hearing multiple complaints from people who said that they had been attacked by a similar looking creature with a similar description to those who had mentioned it in the papers. It's reported though that the one major complaint that decided to change the Lord Mayor's mind was that of a friend he knew who said that one of his servants had been attacked by a man in a bear suit. After the Mayor of London had heard of this, he immediately put out a bounty for Spring-heeled Jack. After this announcement, there were sightings of Spring-heeled Jack all across England. In 1870, the army even set up traps after several sentries swear they saw a man who jumped onto their sentry boxes. This is soon followed up in a close pursuit in Lincoln, where several people started to open fire on Spring-heeled Jack, but he just laughed at them and ran away. His last sighting was in 1904 at Everton in Liverpool, where he was seen leaping back and forth from the cobbles to the rooftops. Luckily, he hasn't been seen since, but no one knows who he was to this day, or even if he was a man or a devil. The Monkey Man of Delhi was a creature which was sighted in 2001 in the city of New Delhi in India. Eyewitnesses say that this creature looks similar to that of a monkey, only this creature seemed to be nocturnal. People say that this creature wore metal claws, a metal helmet, metal trousers. There are some people who even state that it had red eyes underneath the goggles that it wore as well, and that it had 3 buttons on its chest. Some people believe that this monkey was a representation of the human deity called Hanuman, who was the god of courage, self-discipline, wisdom, strength, and devotion. Some people reported being scratched by this creature's claws, and there were even alleged reports of people being killed by this creature, which caused the police to eventually get involved. The only known weakness to the Monkey Man of Delhi was that if you shone a light in its eyes, then it would be blinded for a while, as people thought that it wore night vision goggles. People also say that if you threw water on its chest, it would allegedly short-circuit the buttons attached to its chest, as it was some kind of robotic gear which helped it get around. Paul is Dead is a rumour surrounding the musician Paul McCartney, where it was reported that Paul McCartney crashed in his car on the M5 in the UK in 1966. However, such an event never happened, but fans started to speculate that Paul McCartney had been replaced by an imposter called Billy Shears, who looked exactly like Paul McCartney. Apparently the Beatles have made several references to Paul's death. These include John Lennon's vocals at the end of Strawberry Fields Forever, which fans reported saying, "I buried Paul," but John Lennon has stated multiple times saying that he said cranberry sauce instead. There are several references, apparently, on the Sgt. Pepper's album cover as well, which people point to as evidence, such as the bouquet of flowers in the shape of a bass, which was the instrument Paul played the most in the Beatles. One of the most famous references was in the song Revolution No. 9, in which a voice can be heard repeatedly saying, "Number 9, but people have reversed this audio and heard, "Turn me on, dead man." John Lennon has also referenced this rumour in a later song in his solo career, on the album Imagine, with the song called How Do You Sleep, which was already a song about how much John Lennon disliked Paul McCartney, but he referenced this in the line, "Those freaks was right when they said you was dead." The Spider in a Hairdo is about a young woman who doesn't bother to wash her hair because she wants to keep it in the same beehive hairstyle every day, so she could show it off to her friends. However, she ends up not washing her hair for around 3 months, when suddenly the next day in school, her head crashes down onto her desk. The teacher proceeds to check up on her, when suddenly they notice blood falling down her head. When this student is transported to the hospital, it is revealed that this student had black widows growing in her hairdo, and they eventually ate into her scalpel. This urban legend also has a very similar version, starring a hippie as the main character instead, and at the end, maggots start to devour their scalpel. This urban legend is said to have been created as far back as the 13th century, where a story appeared of a woman not going to church on time, and was punished by the devil entering into her hairdo as a spider, and this caused her to die. Futakuchi-onna is a creature in Japanese mythology which appears to be a regular woman who has been afflicted by a terrible curse or disease. One of the original stories of Futakuchi-onna goes that a stingy man could not bear the thought of having to pay for meals for her wife and a future family. This was until he met a woman one day who he saw ate barely any food, so he decided that this woman should be his wife. However, he noticed that his rice supply was slowly decreasing. He thought that this woman was secretly eating, so he decided to fake going to work and waited until he saw his wife start eating from the rice reserve. Then he would confront her about it. That was until he saw his wife undo the back of her hair to reveal a mouth in the back of her head that started eating out of the rice reserve, using the woman's hair to grab handfuls of rice, rapidly devouring each piece the mouth was given. The second mouth would often cry out in pleasure in a deep, raspy voice. When he learned of this news, he decided to divorce his wife immediately, but before he could sign any kind of contract, his wife learned of what he planned to do and trapped him in her bathtub and took him up to the mountain. The man luckily escaped the bathtub before the Futakuchi-onna noticed. He hid in a strongly scented lily marsh until he knew that the creature was gone. Another story tells of a stepmother who would feed her own daughter more than enough food, but would often starve her stepdaughter, who she gave a minimum amount of food to survive on. The stepdaughter grew more ill as the days went on, but the stepmother didn't do anything to help her stepdaughter's illness, until the stepdaughter eventually starved to death. After 49 days, the stepmother was struck down with a terrible headache, which eventually caused the back of her head to crack open, revealing large teeth, lips, and a tongue. This mouth would eventually cause the stepmother a great amount of pain until it was fed, and if it wasn't, it would scream out in the voice of her dead stepdaughter, leaving the stepmother to have to constantly feed both of her mouths, whilst also feeling the same starvation that her stepdaughter faced in her final days. The Girl in the Gap is a Japanese creature who waits in the gaps of your house, whether that be a gap in your wardrobe, a crack in your wall, or even underneath your bed. The Girl in the Gap will watch you until you notice her. Then she will ask you a question of whether you want to play a game of hide and seek. It will not matter if you answer yes or no. She will start to play the game no matter what you say. She will disappear after she asks this question, but if you ever see her again, you will be taken to another dimension, which has been theorized to be hell itself, but no one knows because no one has ever come back. Red Cloak is a creature often referred to as akamanto, which also means red cloak in Japanese. This creature is said to appear in haunted stools in public restrooms. This creature is said to commonly be seen in women's restrooms, as this creature might have some resentment against women when it was alive. The story goes that when a participant is finished with using the toilet, that they will suddenly hear a voice say, "Do you want red paper or blue paper?" If this participant replies with red paper, then the spirit will execute the victim in such a way where the bathroom stall will look like it is soaked in their blood, as well as the victim's outfit, so it will look like they are wearing a red cloak as well. As the rumour goes around this nearby area, someone else encounters this spirit, and since they know what will happen if they say red paper, they decide to say blue paper, after which all the blood was sucked out of their body, leaving them blue-faced on the floor. There are other variations of this legend stating that the spirit might ask for either red or purple paper. If the person was to say purple paper, then they would be able to escape. Other reports state that you can escape this creature by saying nothing, so it will ignore you and move on to somewhere else. However, other reports state that the spirit will drown you in the toilet if you try to be smart, showing that there is no true way to escape the akamanto. The Red Room is an urban legend that I have already covered on my channel. However, I didn't feel I did a very good job on my other video, so I'll try to explain it better here. A young boy is at a school when he hears about a certain website called The Red Room that someone allegedly accessed before dying a horrible death. Enticed with a morbid curiosity, the boy decides to look for this Red Room website after school. After many hours, he lays exhausted with no luck of finding this Red Room until he sees a link that looks promising. A pop-up then appears on his computer saying, "Do you like?" with a question mark at the end. The boy is confused by this and closes the pop-up. The pop-up appears again as the boy tries to repeatedly close this pop-up. However, each time he clicks off, it grows larger, showing more text. It eventually shows the full message saying, "Do you like the Red Room?" The pop-up then expands to the whole screen, showing multiple names of people that eventually have died, and he sees his friend's name eventually appear, who he overheard the conversation from. The screen then cracks as the boy's name appears. His parents enter his room, only to see nothing but his blood covering the walls of his room. The 8-foot-tall woman, also known as the Hachsagmu-sama, is a story told by a child where they were playing in their grandparents' garden when suddenly they hear a strange noise behind them going, "Po, po, po, po." They think that this voice sounds like a deep male's voice. This child then sees a straw hat left on top of the hedge. The hat suddenly starts to move until the child realizes that this hat is attached to a figure that is at least 8 feet tall, and the sound that was coming from earlier still echoes around the child. The child sees that this is in fact a woman. The woman then smiles at the child and walks into the distance, echoing her chants throughout the land. This child then goes to their grandparents, who are majorly concerned when this child tells them what just happened. The grandmother then explains that this child has just been seen by the 8-foot-tall woman, and that the child will be taken in a few days, or they will die if they don't do anything to protect this child. The grandpa then gives the child a special parchment of paper, which the child has to hold on to, and the grandmother is told to keep her eyes on the child at all times, whilst the grandfather is looking for a woman called Kei-san. The child was then put into a room where they were asked to spend the night alone by Kei-san and the grandfather until 7 AM, with every bit of the room locked down. This was to make sure that the 8-foot-tall woman wouldn't steal their child in the late hours of the night. After the night, the child wakes up and is taken to the airport in a van with his grandparents and his father, as well as other family members. They are still being pursued by this 8-foot-tall woman, and have to occasionally ask the child to not look, for fearing that this 8-foot-tall woman will take their child the second they lay eyes on them. When the father and the son eventually reach this airport, they leave the country immediately, leaving the grandparents. And this is to make sure that this child is never kidnapped by this creature and never seen by it, so it can live out its curse who it is inflicted upon everyone who sees its face. Walking Sam is a creature which is said to haunt the Pine Ridge Reservation near the Black Hills in South Dakota. Walking Sam is described as being over 7 foot tall, appearing incredibly thin, almost stick-like, and wearing a stovepipe hat. He has eyes, but no mouth. It's also described that Walking Sam has the bodies of his previous victims underneath his arms whenever he lifts them. Walking Sam is said to be able to convince teenagers to hang themselves by firstly whispering in their ear. Then they will feel a deep feeling of death envelop them, and this victim will suddenly be haunted by voices telling them that they should no longer live, and that they have no reason to live. This will start to continue until the teenager finally commits the act. Walking Sam seems to go after anyone under the age of 25, but there have been cases of him going over this age range as well. Between the years 2014 and 2015, there were over 103 suicide attempts, which have been attributed to Walking Sam, but luckily only 9 of these attempts were successful. Other reports state that Walking Sam may just be a friendly entity who just wants to make friends. However, a bad omen that follows him causes these teens to commit suicide who become friends with him. This eventually causes Walking Sam to walk the Pine Ridge Reservation alone, with this curse hurting any human being he wants to befriend. The Midnight Jogger is also referred to as the Phantom Jogger of Canyon Hill. This apparition is said to appear at the Canyon Hill Cemetery. The spirit can only be summoned if you complete a ritual correctly. Firstly, you have to park between two trees facing the cemetery, and if you manage to park between the correct trees, the Midnight Jogger will come over to your car and tap on the window. She will appear to have no legs, and when you see her, she will merely hover in midair with only a head and torso as her entire body. Bodies in the Sydney Harbour Bridge is an urban legend about the Australian world wonder of the same name, where in 1926 it was reported that during the construction of one of the pillars of the bridge, 16 men decided to have a break from the construction and decided to hide in the pillar so they wouldn't get shouted at by their boss. However, these men spent a bit too long inside of this pillar because they were having that good of a time drinking, smoking and playing cards. No one had heard from these men in hours, and no one knew where they were. The next morning, this part of the bridge was capped, meaning that all of these men had been crushed to death by massive pieces of stone that were used to fill this part of the bridge. It wasn't until later on that these workers started to notice that there were significantly less workers than before. A complaint to search for these workers had reached the head of the construction project, to which he just said to continue on with this project as these men would soon turn up, because searching for these men was less important than building the greatest bridge the world had ever seen. When the workers had heard these rumours, they made sure to sprinkle droplets of wine into the bridge's pillars as a sign of respect for the dead, and to make sure that they wouldn't meet a similar fate to their co-workers. The Himuro Mansion is a building in Japan which many fear to even step inside, due to people allegedly being found dead inside of its walls, as well as people being found with strange rope marks on their hands after they have left the building. These cases are most likely due to the demon which haunts these grounds, who is said to have lived underneath the house whilst the Himuro family have lived there. The Himuro family would perform a ritual every 50 years called the Strangling Ritual, which kept this demon satisfied so the family could continue on living there. The Strangling Ritual consisted of a young girl being chosen at birth by the master of the house to be used for the ritual. The girl would then have to live her life in isolation from the rest of the world without making any contact with anyone outside of her family. Once it was time to perform this ritual, the family would tie every limb of this girl to an animal of some kind, and they would pull until this girl was torn to shreds, leaving her blood everywhere for the demons to witness. This was thought to keep the demon at bay, as this ritual had seemed to work for many generations in the Himuro family. This was until one rotation of the ritual, in which the young girl saw a man staring at her through her window, and she instantly fell in love with him, as he did with her. But in the eyes of the master of this house, this made her tainted and unworthy of the ritual, now meaning he had no one to sacrifice for the demon. Fearing for his family, the master of the house decided to spare his family from the demon's wrath by massacring them all. Then, himself. It is said that no one really knows where the Himuro Mansion is, but if you find it, your body might not be seen again, alive or dead. The Montauk Project is an urban legend surrounding the military airbase known as Camp Hero. Allegedly, there were several experiments being conducted on young teenagers who were kidnapped from their homes. These experiments are said to be early looks into time travel, extraterrestrial contact, teleportation, and is even stated to be a continuation of the MK-Ultra project. Scientists working there report that children would be tortured in horrific ways, with near drownings, electrocutions, and live burial experiments. Once the child was close to death, a scientist would take them out of the experiment and declare that they were their savior, and the child would continue to praise them like they were a god. These children would then become spies when they were old enough and carry out government operations from around the world. Many of the alleged witnesses to these experiments state that these stories are true, and they have witnessed alien activity with their own eyes, many recounting of how these large and grey aliens would often disregard the scientists and would only speak to certain figures of authority who they would openly talk to. These scientists have held close to these stories up until their last breath. The night marches are said to be certain apparitions which haunt certain spiritual areas of Hawaii, such as graveyards, valleys, lava fields, and beaches. These apparitions are said to look like ancient Hawaiian warriors who are fully dressed in battle clothing with drum marchers beckoning their wake. Some people state that this ghostly army is looking for new members to join their ranks, or for someone to show them the way to salvation where they can finally rest. People most commonly report that these night marchers are seen in dark, foggy nights, but have occasionally been sighted during the day as well. It is said that you must not look into the chief's eyes of the night marchers, or any of the other beings walking with them, otherwise yourself or one of your relatives will be struck down by instant death, or a bolt of lightning emanating from the warrior's eyes that will disintegrate you, and your body will be left as a fog circulating around the night marcher's parade. People have avoided this fate by either not making eye contact by hiding face down on the ground, or by seeing an ancestor of theirs who are in the same bloodline as them, and it will save them from meeting the same fate, as many have done so before. No Face is a creature that is also referred to as the No Power Bow. This creature is said to appear on the lonely roads of Japan. It may first appear like an ordinary human being, but will suddenly appear to have no facial features upon closer inspection. These creatures will often appear in groups, as to confuse the human victim even more. When this victim finds themselves in an encounter with an Operabo, they will often try to frantically find help from anyone who is nearby. This person will often end up finding an Operabo, so when the victim is describing their encounter to this person about seeing this creature with no face, they might end up saying, "You mean like this?" before this person will rip off their face, revealing that they are no parabao to the victim as well. Often these creatures will pursue a victim until they reach their house, and they will play their last trick by replacing one of the loved ones of the victim, making the victim run out of their house in search of an actual human being to recount their tale of horror to. Kisaragi Station was a story posted on 2chan as an interaction between people trying to communicate to a girl known as Hasumi. This interaction begins with Hasumi telling 2chan that the train hasn't had a single stop for around 20 minutes, when it usually would have stopped around 5 or 7 times. Suddenly the train decides to stop at a place called Kisaragi Station. 2chan begs for Hasumi to stay on the train, but she gets off and decides to look for a phone or a person nearby to ask for directions on help on how to get back home. However, there appears to be no one at this station, and there are no buildings nearby. On 2chan they discover that the kanji of Oni means Kisaragi, which means that she is quite literally staying at the demon station. Hasumi says that she tried to look up the town's name on her phone, but her phone just came up with an error message. She can get through to her parents and phones them, to which her father replied that she should phone the police immediately. She also states that she had never heard of Kisaragi Station either. When Hasumi phoned the police, they are reported to have just acted aggressive towards her, like she is playing a prank on them, and she ended up having to apologize to them instead of asking for help. 2chan then suggests that she spends the night at the station, but Hasumi doesn't like this idea and decides to walk down a tunnel from where the train came from. She says that she can hear distant drum beats with accompanying bells, to which 2chan just suggests that it's probably a festival nearby. Hasumi then says she is afraid to look behind her because she fears something is there. 2chan then says that she needs to run as fast as possible without looking behind her, or whatever is behind her will immediately take her away. Hasumi ends up hearing something behind her though. Someone appears to be shouting, "Hey, you can't walk along the railway track, it's dangerous," to which she looked behind her only to see an old man with one leg. He then disappeared into the shadows of the tunnel. Hasumi, after seeing this, is suddenly stuck in the position she is standing in. Hasumi says she can't run anymore, she can't walk anymore, so she has to limp across the tracks. Hasumi is bleeding and holding onto her broken heel, which she broke earlier on that night. When Hasumi finds the entrance to the tunnel, she says that it is called Isunuki. When she has finally exited the tunnel, she sees a young man standing there. 2chan advises her that this young man may be more of a threat towards her than anything in the tunnel or in Kisaragi Station. Hasumi replies back saying that she is now in the car with the young man, saying that he is really polite and is taking her to a hotel nearby. Hasumi reports that her phone is on its last piece of charge, saying that she's heading towards a mountainous area with no sign of human life, and says that things are starting to look strange in her environment. Hasumi states that she will try to escape the car and message back to 2chan when she has escaped. Hasumi never messaged back to 2chan ever again. Her fate is unknown, but it's a popular theory that she was taken to an alternate dimension, or even a version of hell. The Cursed Kleenex commercial refers to a 1986 Japanese commercial run by the company Kleenex, in which they released 3 commercials for a Japanese audience. There's an allegedly cursed one, in which a woman can be seen talking to a child whose body appears to be red, apart from its hair, which is green, with a horn sticking out of it, like that of a demon baby. They are sitting on what looks like to be straw, and a song is playing over the commercial. The song is allegedly a German curse, and apparently whoever listens to it and watches the commercial either becomes incredibly ill or wants to end their own life. The cameraman who filmed this advertisement was burned to death by a sauna accident. Everyone else associated with the commercial died a horrible death, and when it aired on TV, no one who helped create it was still alive. The actress in the video allegedly gave birth to a demonic baby and went insane, only to end her life. The child in the commercial was allegedly hit and decapitated by a car after his appearance. There is also an angel version of this commercial as well, but it is thought that there is another variation of this video, which is the cursed one, which no one yet has found. The Well to Hell is a story about Russian scientists who have dug a hole so deep into the Earth's crust in Siberia that they have drilled further than anyone else before them. Eventually their drill starts to rotate wildly, which means they have finally cracked through into something. They see that the temperature is strangely hotter than they thought it would be, being over 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, meaning that they might have found something other than the Earth's core. They decide to put an ultra-sensitive microphone into the hole that they have created, and initially think that the sound of the equipment is malfunctioning, because the sound that is playing is so high-pitched, but they soon discover that they are actually listening to the screams of millions of people who are trapped inside of hell itself. It's at that moment where at least half of the workforce abandon this project, and the lead scientist, Dr. Azakov, says hopefully whatever is down there will stay there. This scientist, Dr. Azakov, then decides to go on to create an even deeper hole in Alaska, which then created an explosion, killing 3 oil workers and creating a cloud of Satan himself. Fatal Fare is a Japanese urban legend about an experienced taxi driver picking up a young man off the road who told him that he would tell the directions back to his home, but not the actual address itself. The taxi driver didn't find this particularly strange, as he had dealt with more private people before, so he kept listening to this young man's instructions until he noticed that he wasn't anywhere that looked familiar to him, so he became more and more reliant on the young man's instructions. When he asked for the young man's instructions again, the young man was nowhere to be seen, and the taxi driver was starting to panic. He forgot to look at the road he was driving down, and just as he looked back, he was just about to fall off a cliff's edge. The last thing he saw before he died was some particularly sharp rock edges going straight towards his head. The 10-Day Dream is a Japanese urban legend. This story is allegedly cursed, and you will start to feel the side effects of hearing this story in 3 days. If you would like to skip ahead to the timestamp, go ahead. This story is a set of dreams that are set to occur within 3 days after you have heard this story. You must carry out certain rules every night, otherwise you'll meet a horrific end, being forever trapped inside of this dream cycle. The first night you will see a girl standing at your window. You must let her in. On the second night, this girl is now in your room and looking down at the ground. You are unable to see her face because of her long black hair. She is muttering, "Please, please, and between other pieces of incomprehensible dialogue, you must lay her down next to you in bed. On the third night, you will see the girl next to you, and she will appear to be very badly burnt all over her body. You must not scream when you make eye contact with her. On the fourth night, you will decide to go to the park with the girl. You must go to the park with the girl without saying a single word after leaving your room. On the fifth night, you're in a park of some kind and see a woman pushing a stroller with a baby inside. When you take a closer look at both of these people though, you realise that this woman is actually a cat and the baby is a dog. You must kill one of these beings. On the sixth night, you will see an airship land in the park. You will ask the girl whether she wants to go on the airship. You will get on the airship before it takes off. On the seventh night, you notice that the airship is filled with people who have heard this story as well. You must find a seat on the airship, regardless of any circumstance. On the eighth night, you will start to see black and red roses fall upon you. You must throw out only the black roses out of the airship's window. On the ninth night, the airship will land back in the park. You must go back home and go back to your bed with the girl, and you must lay both in bed. On the 10th night, no one knows what happens, unless they have followed all the previous rules of the legend. But one rule is known. Once you awaken from this dream, you must tell this story to the next person you see, otherwise you will feel the wrath of the entity of the 10-day dream. Stoll's Gateway to Hell refers to the urban legend that a church in the town of Stoll, in the state of Kansas, houses one of the 7 gateways on Earth that lead to hell. It's said that there were many supernatural events that happened around this cemetery, including witchcraft, hauntings, and even sightings of the devil itself. On the 20th of March 1978, people waited in anticipation for the devil to arrive, but it never did. People say that the inside of the church of this cemetery has never had rain inside of it, despite it having no roof. People have also claimed that they have felt a warm breeze brush aside them and act violently towards them, claiming it's a wind from hell itself, released by the portal underneath the church. This church was demolished in 2002 by an unknown force. The owner claimed he never signed off on any demolition warrants, but people claim that the church wall was seen falling down a week before. It's now stated that this portal has been closed, but the 6 others are still active across the world. Dream School is a story that is cursed, and it is said that if you hear this story, you'll be transported to this location the next time you fall asleep if you do not forget about it within a week. So here is the timestamp if you want to skip ahead. The story starts with a boy named Kay, who found himself wandering through a school whose interiors he did not recognize. The school was clearly in darkness, as it seemed to be night outside, with no sign of the moon. Kay tried to break the windows and doors, but none of them showed any signs of damage. He tried to break the glass of the windows, but nothing seemed to show up, like they were made out of some kind of heavy, resistant material. The school seemed to loop around forever in a circle, as Kay repeatedly found himself in the same place over and over again. Kay decided to run in another direction. They found themselves going left and right, and found themselves in an economics classroom. He exits this classroom before finding himself in various other rooms before resting on the stairs. He then looks at the clock as it swings back and forth, making a light ticking noise. As soon as Kay tried to focus in on this sound, he started to hear another sound of distant footsteps catching up to his location. He started to run in the opposite direction, but as this running becomes more aggressive, he ended up in a classroom marked 108. The classroom was completely dark and deserted, as Kay searched for a key or something to keep him safe. The bangs on the door that he had locked rang out louder and louder, as Kay lay on the floor along with the contents of the room spilled out. Kay opened up the door, only to see the empty hallway filled to the brim with children dead on the floor, their limbs laying over the floor of the corridor in a motion where it looked like they were almost trying to connect back to their bodies. After seeing this in the dream, Kay was forever in a comatose state, forever trapped inside the dream, unable to exit out of his mind. It is said that if you don't forget this story within a week, you'll be taken to the same dream school when you fall asleep, trapped to meet the same fate as Kay did before you. The Rat King is a supposed creature made up of multiple rats' tails, creating one giant rat. These Rat Kings were allegedly formed from underground colonies of rats getting so matted together they ended up joining into one singular rat. Since all of these rats are in such a confined, tight space after this, they are all trying to escape this situation and will start to press against each other, releasing an oil from their skin that merges their skins together, creating one giant rat creature made up of several smaller creatures that can chase and spread disease at a much more rapid and deadly rate. The Mad Gasser of Mattoon is an urban legend about someone who used to go around different houses in Mattoon, in the state of Illinois, with a spray that eliminated some kind of mysterious chemical around the victims' houses. This would make every person in this household have symptoms of nausea, headaches, spitting up blood, and even near complete paralysis. People report smelling a cheap perfume before feeling the side effects of these episodes. It was originally thought to be a case of mass hysteria, but now it has been seen that this might have been an actual person who had a laboratory underneath their house, creating these noxious smells to try and attack a neighbourhood for not accepting them into it, and try to show their revenge by going around in a shadowy outfit, avoiding all lines of sight during the daylight, and trying to poison those who committed wrong against them in their lifetime. Satoru-kun is an urban legend in Japan about the spirit of a young boy who you can call if you would like any question in the world answered. However, you must follow several steps if you want to stay alive after your encounter with Satoru-kun. First of all, you need to go to a payphone and have a mobile phone. Dial your own phone number on the public payphone and say, "Satoru-kun, Satoru-kun, please answer. Satoru-kun, Satoru-kun, please answer if you are there." Once you have done this, hang up the payphone and turn off your mobile phone. Within the next 24 hours, you shall receive a call from Satoru-kun on your mobile phone. Each time he calls you, he will be closer to your location. When he calls you and says, "I am behind you now," do not look behind you. Do not try to touch him. Do not delay your question to Satoru-kun. Ask him immediately. If you break any of these rules, or you don't have a question to ask Satoru-kun, he will drag you to hell immediately, without hesitation. The Blue Star Tattoo legend, also known as Blue Star Acid, is an urban legend that was commonly heard around the 1980s and the 1990s. This urban legend would typically be spread for a flyer, which would describe these tattoos that are given to children of popular characters, such as Mickey Mouse, the Superman symbol, and Bart Simpson, or they would just be generic animals or creatures which would appeal to children, like butterflies or clowns. Apparently these tattoos would be laced with LSD and would be wrapped in foil, so when the child touches them, they would get an immediate high from the drug. The report often cites that the drug causes more deadly side effects than a regular dose of LSD, such as uncontrollable laughter, severe vomiting, changes in body temperature, hallucinations, and wild mood swings. This report usually ends with the flyer telling the reader that there have already been several deaths caused by these LSD tattoos, and that they should spread the news to everyone they know who has a child. Rumours of this urban legend seem to go back to an allegedly misprinted police flyer, stating that the police force has found some kind of blotter acid, or some kind of absorbent paper soaked in traces of LSD, but none of these reports have ever confirmed to be true or false. The Water Babies urban legends refers to many legends of creatures across America who hide in lakes, waiting to lure in their victims, draw them close, and drown them in the waters. In Pocatello in the state of Idaho, It's said that the Masuku Rock State Park was once a place of long-lasting famine, which meant that the local Native Americans couldn't feed their own people, so the mothers of this community had to sacrifice their babies so the rest of the community could eat. The mothers tried to drown their babies in the lake and Masuku Rocks, only resulting in their babies feeding on tadpoles, weeds, and small fish. By the time the famine was over, these babies had transformed into strange fish-like creatures with fins and gills attached to them. They now haunt the lake of Masuku Rocks, waiting to drown anyone foolish enough to stand too close to the edge of the lake. In the state of Idaho, there is also another iteration of the water babies urban legend, stating that these creatures aren't actually human babies, but are actually dwarf-like creatures who produce the same sounds as human child crying, but this is to merely lure unsuspecting prey closer to where they are hiding, so they can pounce out on their victims and drown them once they get close enough. Another Native American story, in Pyramid Lake in the state of Nevada, there was once told a story of a young man who saw a beautiful woman who had the tail of a fish. This man brought this woman back to his tribal camp, only for the camp's people to be unhappy with him, forcing him to reject this woman from his life and send her back to the lake. The man did what he asked. In return, this woman cursed the Pyramid Lake, causing a baby to become the curse of the water spirit in the form of a snake. This baby suddenly grew fangs from its mouth and bit into the mother of this child. To save the mother, a deal was struck with the local tribe and the creature. The mother would be released from this baby's grasp as long as the creature could live in Pyramid Lake forever, without it being disturbed. It's said that if you get too close to the edge of Pyramid Lake, you will see this creature rising up from the water before its teeth grip into you, dragging you into the depths. A boohag is a creature which is mostly spoken about in the states of North and South Carolina in the USA. They are said to be a mix between a vampire and a witch, and leech off their prey by either sucking their blood from their noses, or riding on top of them and sucking out all of the air they produce. These creatures are said to wear human skin in the day, so they can avoid suspicion, but when it gets closer to night, they will take off the skin, hide it somewhere in the house, where no one would usually look in the dead of night. One story goes that a man who was talking with his friend explained that his wife seemed to mysteriously disappear every night when she was in bed with him, and wouldn't return until the morning. The friend suggested that he should pretend to fall asleep when his wife leaves, then he should follow her. His friend also suspected that his wife was a boohag, and told him to find the skin that she uses and pour salt and pepper onto it so she couldn't get back into her skin, which would leave her vulnerable to everyone seeing her true form. That night the man did exactly what his friend planned to do, and heard his wife going down the stairs. When he looked to see what his wife was doing, he saw her removing her skin, pushing it into a ball, and hiding it underneath the stairs. She leapt up the chimney immediately after this. Then the man put salt and pepper all over the human skin shell. He heard sounds coming from the chimney and ran upstairs to his room, pretending to be asleep. He heard his wife making strange noises downstairs, repeating the chant, "Skin, you know me. Skin, this is me." This made it obvious to the man that she couldn't get back into her skin. He then heard her coming up the stairs and slumped in the bed next to him. He went to touch his wife, but he felt an incredibly humid, sweaty feeling from the creature next to him, which felt like rubber left in the sun for too long. When he got up the next morning, he tried to tempt his wife after bed by making her breakfast, but she claimed she was too ill to eat. He then went downstairs and said that he was going to do some gardening, but he just hid behind the kitchen door so he could see what his wife would do. He heard footsteps coming downstairs, chanting the same chant as before. This caused the man to seek help from a conjure man who was his friend. He told the conjure man about his dilemma and went to see his wife, who was still pretending to be asleep. He told the conjure man about this dilemma, so they both went to see his wife, who was still pretending to be asleep. The conjure man ripped the sheet off of her to reveal her in her boohag form, looking meaty and bloody. The man and the conjure man threw the boohag into a searing hot pitch, where the creature smouldered until its cries were heard no more. The lighthouse in a naval vessel is a story that's often told as a parable to remind the listeners of the value of self-importance and how they shouldn't disregard other people because they believe that they are more powerful than they are. The story begins with a United States Navy ship, or Royal Navy Navy ship, delivering a broadcast to a nearby Canadian, Irish, or Spanish frequency, to which they state that the other frequencies should divert their courses immediately from the naval ship, otherwise they will crash and collide into each other. The other responder refuses and responds by saying that the naval fleet should turn 50 degrees south to avoid a possible collision. The naval ship gets more aggressive and responds to the lesser force that they should turn 15 degrees. The other frequency fights back once more, requesting that the naval vessel needs to turn south by 15 degrees. The naval vessel then responds by saying that they are not afraid to blow their ship out of the water if they do not move out of the way, because they have more power and manpower on board to destroy whatever ship they are riding, unless they turn 15 degrees. The other frequency then responds by saying that they are a lighthouse, so it's the naval vessel's call whether they want to crash into the cliffs or not. It has been passed down from generation to generation that there was a pond in Epping Forest in England that causes anyone who steps too close to it to have an urge to take their own life because of a curse brought to it years ago. According to the legend, 300 years ago there was a couple who were forbidden to see each other because of their family's rivalries. However, the father of the young woman was following this couple into the woods and caught the two of them together. This caused the father to kill the young girl out of fear his family tree would be losing honour from association with the young man's family. After grieving for a short time, the boy returned to the spot where his lover met her untimely demise and threw himself into the water, drowning himself in the pond, hoping that he would be at peace with his lover in the afterlife. However, after this event, the water turned to a black tar-like colour and grew as thick and dense as syrup. Anything that lay around the pool slowly decayed until every bit of life had been sucked out of it, including vegetation, the animals, and even tempting nearby visitors to walk into the pond and succumb to the thick black waters. There have been several reports of people drowning themselves in this pond, despite having no reports of previously wanting to end their own life. It's reported that if you stay near these waters, you will end up like its previous victims, or you will run in fear due to the feeling of uneasiness and evil that the pond emanates. In 1959, there was once a search to find this pond in the Essex Countryside magazine, which was a local newspaper which questioned where the pool was and whether anyone could give any directions towards it. There were no replies that truly indicated towards the direction of the pond, and the ones that did were bogus and false, but there was one letter in particular that caught the eye of the journalist, which refused to give away the location of the pond, as the writer thought it was too wretched to be known to the general public. They described the pond, as previously stated, as well as being an extremely dense part of the forest, far away from any modern contact, and stated that if any light were to go into the waters of the pond, there would be no reflection back, as the waters consume anything that comes close to them, not letting the victim see the light of day ever again. Even as we get further and further into the future with the power of the internet, we get no closer to finding the Epping Forest pond, as any searches from satellites would deem fruitless, as this pond would still be surrounded by other pieces of vegetation, far away from the source, covering up the source of the pond itself. There is even a petition online to shut down the surrounding area of Epping Forest, or to even have a 24-hour surveillance system put up to dissuade those who wish to look for the pond. In the 1990s in the city of Bangalore, in India, there were reports going around of a witch who would knock on several homeowners' doors, waiting for the owner to let them in. This witch would often entice these homeowners by using the voice of their loved ones, so they could feel even worse by not opening up the door and letting their loved ones succumb to this witch. However, it was stated that if the homeowner opened up their door to the witch, they would immediately be cursed by this creature before it ran off into the night. This homeowner would then die within the next 24 hours. Word of this spread intensely throughout the city of Bangalore, and people started to paint the words Nalaba onto their doors, which translates to "come tomorrow." The witch would do exactly as you told it to, and come back the next day, to which it would see the words would still be there, so it would come back the next day. Because of this, it would come back indefinitely, and go around in a circle, going around the neighbourhood forever, waiting for someone to let them in. It is now a tradition on April the 1st to put the words Nalibar on the front of your house in Bangalore, which is now known as the city of Bengaluru. Some people disperse this legend as burglars trying to break into people's houses. However, many still believe that this creature roams the nights in Bengaluru, waiting for the next unbeliever to open up their door. Pinky Pinky is said to be a bogeyman-like creature in South Africa who used to be quite active in the older parts of South Africa, but was thought to have merely disappeared into local folklore. However, this being was woken from dormancy in the 1990s, when there were several reports of little girls being attacked inside the girls' bathroom if they were wearing anything that was the colour pink. This being is said to be violent and murderous, and could commit a number of other horrific actions if it wishes to. It's said that only little girls can see this creature, whilst little boys cannot. This creature is said to be a combination of a man, woman, dog, cat, and other creatures. It has also been described as Tokashi-like, which is a creature from Zulu folklore, which is said to haunt the victims in their sleep, similar to a boo hag or a bogeyman. But a Pinky Pinky is also said to take shape of whatever the victim imagines a Pinky Pinky to look like. The Black Volga is an urban legend from Poland about a particular model of car called a Volga, which would be painted black and appear in neighbourhoods. This car would roll up to passerbys and ask them what time it is. If the passerby responded with the time, a number of things is said to happen depending on who you're hearing the story from. In one version, it is said that a religious cult is inside the car and will abduct children this way to use them as a ritual sacrifice to Satan. Another account states that this car was driven by a demon itself, and when asked for at a time, the victim would die at the time they responded with the next day, and their soul would be collected as a fare by this demon, unless they responded to the demon back with the phrase, "It's God's time," to which the demon would disappear. Another version states that the Volga was driven by a crazed killer who would ask for the time only to abduct, torture, and eventually kill whoever answered their question. However, the one story I find the most disturbing out of all of these is that people believe that the Polish government intentionally spread these rumours about the Black Volga to cover up what was really happening. Some people believe that the Polish government themselves were kidnapping people who were actively denouncing the government and their actions, to which people would report seeing a Black Volga appear, only to see this unsuspecting passenger be taken and never seen again. A mother and her daughter decide to take a trip to France, when suddenly the mother becomes violently ill, and the daughter immediately goes to a doctor to have a checkup on the mother. The doctor suggests that the young woman goes to a chemist for a certain drug, so the daughter goes to the chemist, only to return to the reception of the hotel, with the receptionist stating that they've never met her or her mother before, and there was never a record of them staying, ever, in this hotel. This is where two different versions of the story split. In one version, the daughter uncovers that the mother has been hidden in the hotel, because the doctor realised the mother had the plague, and for the fear of having to tell the local community that this town has now had a plague victim, which would greatly destroy its reputation and tourism, decides to cover up the mother's death by hiding her in a spare room. The daughter ends up winning a large settlement of money, which covers over this slight inconvenience in her trip. However, in the other version, the daughter ends up going to a travel agency about the hotel not giving her her booking, to which the travel agency says that they have had no past history with the daughter or the mother, and they believe that the daughter is lying about being a British citizen, so they decide to call the police. The police eventually interrogate the daughter, only to have her sent to a mental hospital, as they could find no evidence that the mother ever existed in this country, along with her. In the mental hospital, she argues with the patients and staff alike about her and her mother's past existence in this country. In the end, she must lie about her mother never existing, and by saying that she made it all up as a form of grief, from realising she never met her mother because she died when she was born. Through doing this, she was released from the mental hospital and able to eventually return back to England, uncertain to whether her mother really existed at all, whether she was merely a figment of her imagination. The White Death is a legend spread around in both Mexico and Scotland about a girl who lived in complete misery and despair for her life and would do anything to come out of it. Her fondness for the destruction of her life and legacy grew so much that when she eventually passed from taking her life, all of her remaining family members who knew of her existence died within a short amount of time, as well as anyone who had heard of her existence, including you. She will knock on your door at first. The first time it will be for your skin, which she'll sew into her flesh. The second time will be for your hair, which she'll put between her teeth. The third time will be for your bones, which she'll grind into clubs for her next victim. The fourth will be for your heart, the fifth for your teeth, the sixth for your eyes, so no one else will ever be allowed to say that they've seen her. And the seventh will be for the last part of you remaining, your soul, which she will devour and consume to keep her immortal terror alive forever. It is said that she stalks her victims, waiting for the right moment to strike her memory down. She appears to look like a little girl, but it is merely a disguise which she uses to appear harmless to other passerbys who have no knowledge of her past, forgetting about this encounter with the spirit without a second thought. She will track you down wherever you go, no matter which country, no matter how isolated or populated. She will find you, and when you think you're finally safe, she'll be there. According to this urban legend, there have been numerous gas or petrol pumps that have been infected with needles inserted into the pumping grip, which causes the unsuspecting victim to be infected by the disease HIV, hepatitis, or other life-changing diseases. It is said that the perpetrators commit to this crime because they are merely looking for somewhere to leave their needles without being caught, or they are in fact trying to maliciously infect as many people as possible with the disease. Apparently there have been reports of similar infections in coin slots, cinema and theatre seats, and payphone slots. It's also been reported that the perpetrators might also leave behind a message similar to the urban legends like AIDS Mary or AIDS Harry, which will say something along the lines of "Welcome to the wonderful world of AIDS," or "Welcome to the HIV positive family." It seems that the origin point to several of these urban legends goes back to France, where the boss of the company sent out an employee motto warning them about theatre seats which could be possibly infected with needles from AIDS or HIV patients. The employees sent out this report to the press without any authentication from anyone higher up, which might have caused this urban legend to spread around more. However, there hasn't been any proof that this article ever existed. This legend is about a rumour that was circulating around the BlackBerry phone forums between the year of 2012 to 2013. It was said that if you called the emergency service number in your country, then it would charge your phone up to its maximum percentage, because there was a hidden part of your phone's battery that would activate in these dire circumstances, such as needing to contact these emergency services. Of course, this wasn't true, and it was just wasting emergency workers' time having to respond to every single one of these calls. Another superstition arose in 2015, where apparently if you told Siri to charge your phone to 100%, it would call the emergency services immediately and charge your phone fully. This case was actually proved partially true, as it did actually call the emergency services if you said this to Siri. Of course, this was fixed immediately by Apple within the same day, but both cases still persist to this day around small, unknowing online communities. This entry already refers to an urban legend I've already covered in my Fact or Fiction series, but I'll go over the brief details here. In case you're interested, please check out my more in-depth video. In the 90s, there was a string of witness accounts across the UK who claimed that people claiming to be social workers were entering into their houses and checked their children for any signs of abuse. When these visitors would appear, there were usually red flags to show that these were not actually social workers, but more in fact, child kidnappers. Witnesses often stated that the car they came in would have someone inside it who didn't really look that professional, and would often be seen doing something that a social worker wouldn't do, such as smoking. These social workers would also never show their identification to the homeowners, which would cause more suspicion, as every single social worker would always carry around their ID. None of these homeowners have ever let these phantom social workers take their children outside of their house, as it is said that they would kidnap them and they would never be heard from again. There have been several close encounters though, such as phantom social worker being asked to come inside, but instead walking out into the rainy night alone. Another case features a phantom social worker making a quick getaway in a car, full of 3 to 4 men. The most terrifying case features a phantom social worker trying to break into a house, with the mum barely being able to stop them from entering. After the 90s, there have been brief appearances of the phantom social workers who still patrol, around, searching for a vulnerable parent, foolish enough to bring them into their house to inspect their children. Ragu Masuku is a creature which resides in Egyptian folklore. This creature has been described as being a human, a member of the undead, or an entirely unique monstrosity altogether. It's said that parents warn their children that if they misbehave, then Ragu Masuku will visit them in the night. This legend says that this creature only has one leg, or that his other leg is missing, terribly burnt or broken. It's said that if a child doesn't mend their ways, then this creature will visit this child in the dead of night and kidnap them. It's said that this creature will steal one of their legs and return them to their house before dawn. However, it's stated that this creature might grow attached to this child, and if it does, then it could have this child for a very long time. This rumour states that in the year 1968, Jimi Hendrix released 2 green parrots into the skies of London in the name of peace, which is said to have boomed off the newfound population of green parrots in London's Regent Park. However, this rumour is untrue, just like the one about George Michael having an argument with Boy George and breaking their green parrot's cage, releasing them into London. As well as the rumour that after the production of The African Queen, the cast of birds were released into the surrounding environment of London. It's also stated that these birds have been spotted in London as far back as 1855 and was added to by a storm in Britain known as the Great Storm in 1987, when a birdhouse was badly damaged and released their wild inhabitants into the London wilderness. With this entry, I'd like to bring attention to 2 different urban legends about KFC apparently using an extra ingredient in their food. The first goes that KFC have been using genetically altered chicken, which have no beaks, feathers, or legs. Apparently KFC has been doing this for a long time and continue to do so as it keeps costs down and makes sure that they can produce more of their product from these genetically modified chickens. This legend also states that in the KFC commercials, you will never hear the word chicken mentioned, which makes sure that they can't get sued for mislabeling what they're selling. The other urban legend surrounding KFC is a more conventionally told urban legend about a couple going to the movies in their car with the lights off. Whilst they are tucking into their KFC, the woman notices that the chicken doesn't taste right and discovers that she's been eating a deep-fried rat the whole time, which crept into the deep fryer. An Australian version of this urban legend goes that a man walked up to the counter of his local KFC and says, "This is the last one I catch before you pay me," before handing the staff a large possum. This urban legend is kind of nostalgic to me, as it was the first urban legend on my channel that I covered, but that video is pretty bad, so I'm gonna redo it now. The baby train is an urban legend about how couples used to live near railway lines would have nothing to do after they've been woken up by the train at 6 AM, and since work started at 7 AM, then they would try to keep the birth rate up in the local area. These areas are stated to have a much higher birth rate than those without train tracks next to them, which is why this particular train is called the baby train. Another urban legend similar to this is the urban legend of the black hole babies, which refers to a couple who have seemingly nothing else to do than create children whilst their power is out, and whilst their entrances and exits to their building are blocked off by snow. So they decide to pass the time another way. The Rat Man of Southend is an entity that is said to inhabit the town of Southend-on-Sea. This being is either said to be a ghost or a living, breathing creature ready to pounce on its victims. The ghost story states that there was once a homeless man who was almost beaten to death by a gang of youths. As the man lay there after the attack, rats started to feast on him as he started a torturously slow death. It's said that in this underpass you can hear high-pitched squeaking and nails being dragged along the walls, and you may see a hybrid of a man and a rat, both fused together from their deaths on that cold, dark night. This other story illustrates how the mayor of Southend was once a frequent adulterer and was one day caught off guard after finding out that a woman who he had previously been with was pregnant. When she gave birth to this child, he saw that this was no ordinary child, as it seemed to resemble that of a rat and a human. This child began to show more characteristics to that of a rat, rather than that of a human, with this child growing a tail, its nose becoming a snout, and its eventual taste and need for other people's blood. So the mayor decided that the best case for this child would be to encase it in a prison underneath an underpass within its walls, so the general public would never know of its existence. However, this creature chewed its way out the walls, and from that day forth has wreaked havoc in Southend, looking for its next victim in the underpass. The Gay Roommate is an urban legend about two men who share the same room in their college dormitory. When one man realises that he's getting terrible headaches every morning and goes to the doctor to try and find out what is going wrong, the doctor performs several examinations and discovers that nothing is wrong with the patient's head, but discovers that he is bleeding quite a lot from his rectal area. This doctor suggests that the man should stop having so much sex, but the man refuses, saying that he's never had sex. Intrigued by this, the man goes back to his dormitory and begins to search all around his room, which leads to a possible reason for this bleeding. He discovers a bottle of chloroform or ether hidden in his roommate's possessions. This man discovers that his roommate has been using this to sedate him and has been having sex with him. In some versions of this legend, the man punishes this roommate by humiliating him in front of the whole campus full of students so that everyone knows how dangerous this individual is. This urban legend seems to have mutated from a World War II legend, where it was about two military men, and this legend has been reported as far back as 1882, where apparently Arabian businessmen would perform horrific actions on young sailors that they brought back from late-night bars. However, this is most likely a homophobic legend, told to spread panic about homosexuality amongst college students, as no cases of such a legend have ever been reported. A red cap is a creature that is said to roam destroyed or ruined castles in the wilderness between Scotland and England. This creature is described as being similar to a goblin, with its height resembling a minuscule person. It's said to have dried up skin, sharp teeth, and is coated in a suit of miniature armour suited for its body. The red cap apparently waits for its victims to pass, and then will strike out against them, using a nearby rock or boulder to knock out the unsuspecting victim. Then this creature will use its scythe upon the victim's throat, drawing out as much blood as possible before the next visitor comes along. A red cap needs blood to survive, as it puts the blood gathered on its head, so it will drip down and eventually dry to create a substance which looks similar to a cap, hence where its name comes from. However, it's said when this substance runs too dry, then this creature itself will die. In London, in the year 1790, there are reports of a man who would go around and cut holes in women's dresses, then stab the woman's thigh or buttock, and would repeatedly swear at them before running off. This man was known as the London Monster. This happened several times, with witness accounts varying from supposedly true to being that the witness reported this so they could attract sympathy and kindness from members of the public. But this matter would get so out of hand that whilst the press were reporting on this situation, there were wanted posters created for this London Monster to be captured, with a £100 reward to whoever would find this person. A man by the name of Runwick Williams was eventually brought in as a suspect to the police. However, several of the witnesses didn't recognise this man as their attacker, and he had an alibi that he was working at an artificial flower factory at which he worked. This case was put back and forward between several courts and several judges until it was declared that this man was guilty and was unjustly sentenced to 6 years in prison. However, there was never any real evidence which suggested that this man committed these crimes, and a London Monster is nowadays considered to be a case of mass hysteria or a case of several pickpocketings gone wrong. In this story, it's said that on the 4th of July in 1873, a large hurricane was hurled through the Miami Valley, leaving miles of debris behind it. A farm by the name of Anderson Farm was inspecting their trees that had been damaged, when all of a sudden they discovered a skeleton inside one of the trees. The skeleton inside of the tree seems to be quite aged, as its bones started to turn yellow, but the jacket worn by the skeleton seemed to be in remarkably good condition for how long the skeleton had been there for. Inside the jacket, there was a diary which had dates and currency dating back to 1776. In this diary, it stated that the man was a soldier called Roger Vanderburg. This diary stated that he was fighting against the Native Americans in a battle when his side eventually lost. He was captured by the Native Americans and was going to be taken away, but he luckily managed to escape. However, he was greatly injured in this battle and mangled his arm in such a way where he could no longer move it, as well as his legs being almost decimated by the fighting as well. Roger Vanderbilt managed to crawl into a tree. His only options were to stay in the tree and wait for someone to save him, or to give himself up to the Native Americans and be tortured, and most likely eventually die. He chose to wait in the tree, starving, thirsty, and injured, forever waiting for someone to find him. The Warden of Burnbeck Halls is an urban legend that is popular amongst students quite recently in the area of Weston-super-Mare in England. Students have reported that they can sometimes see strange orange lights outside of their doors in the middle of the night, as well as hearing loud stomping and thumping from what sounds like very large boots with a rattle of chains behind them. This being is said to kidnap anyone who attempts to open their door when they start to see or hear the pre-mentioned strange occurrences outside. Allegedly, students have been kidnapped in the middle of the night and never heard from again. It's said that they are dragged by this entity to the entrance of hell underneath the basement of the building. This creature is known as the Warden of Burnbeck Halls, as it seems to go after students who make too much noise in the middle of the night, or those who might be up to mischievous acts in the basement area. Those who have caught a glimpse of this entity describe it as being made up of burning charcoal, pieces of metal moulded into its skin. Rumours from students state that this entity once was a warden who worked at an insane asylum, which was built upon the grounds of Burnbeck Halls before it was demolished. It's said that this warden was doing his nightly patrols of the building when he was suddenly taken aback by some inmates who held him hostage. These inmates are said to have been badly treated by the warden, and he's said to have locked them in the basement area in complete darkness for months at a time for merely not being in their rooms at the correct time he ordered them to be. The inmates threw this warden into the furnace of the building, and he eventually burned to death in searing pain, with no one finding out about his demise until they found his skeletal remains in the ashes of the furnace. I've actually been to Burnbeck Halls, and the atmosphere feels definitely eerie in some parts of the building, as some parts seem to resemble the Overlook Hotel in The Shining, especially the lounge area, which has a hanging chandelier and the general Kubrick-like atmosphere. But the most eerie part of all is the basement, and the entrance to the basement with an unlit staircase, which leads you down into complete darkness. When you enter into the basement, it feels like you've entered into someone's lair almost, and like someone's watching you and waiting to pounce out at you, with just a feeling like a pair of eyes are watching you at all times from an unknown location. But maybe you can take a trip there for yourself and see if there really is a demonic warden at Burnbeck Halls. This entry refers to a story which appears in the urban legend known as Kubeizo de Vaka, which is known in traditional Japanese as Gozu. This name itself is said to create a feeling of uneasiness to whoever hears it muttered, even though the person themselves might not know why, their body and their mind does. The most popular interpretation of this urban legend goes that a teacher is telling scary and disturbing stories to his students on a bus trip when they start to challenge him to tell the most scary, disturbing, inhumane and ungodly story he knows. So he starts to tell them the tale of Gozu. The students begin to get visibly frightened the more he continues, but the more he continues, the more passionate he gets into the story. As soon as he stops for a second of breath, a young boy tells him to stop telling the story immediately, but the teacher carries on until he's finished the entire story, at which point both of his eyes have gone white and he falls to the floor. He wakes, discovering the bodies of all of the students and the bus driver with white foam coming out of their mouths. To this day, this teacher has refused to retell the story, and all copies of this story were deemed too dangerous by the Japanese government. At this moment, only those who remember the story are the only ones who are able to recount it, and those who are brave and foolish enough to recount it are ready to tell of the horrors inside of it. thank you for making it through this Iceberg series with me. I think I've had quite a pleasant time working on it, and it's been nice seeing all the interactions I've got from my audience so far. These urban legends have been really interesting to look into, and I would love to look into some more urban legends, but at the moment I have an idea for another series that I'd like to work on. Please subscribe if you'd like to follow where Bernard Anderson goes next. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.